Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never expected a Saturday morning to feel like a scene straight out of a movie. My name's Oliver, and I've been married to Lila for 8 years. Most people would say we had the perfect life. Cozy little home in the suburbs, 2 cats named Machi and Biscuit, friends who were more family than anything else. But behind the smiles, the picture-perfect posts, and the weekend brunches, something had been quietly fraying. I first noticed it about a year ago. Lila stopped laughing at the little jokes I made, the ones that used to leave her clutching her stomach and wiping tears from her eyes. She'd come home from work, eyes glued to her phone, thumbs moving so fast it looked like she was communicating with some other world I wasn't allowed to enter. I didn't complain. I thought I could wait it out, maybe show her that life together still mattered. But the silence kept growing, wrapping itself around our home like a thick fog. Then came the day I'll never forget. A sunny afternoon, the kind that usually made our street look like something from a painting. We had invited some friends over for a casual barbecue. Nothing fancy, just laughter, drinks, and a couple of bottles of sparkling cider for the kids. But Lila had something else in mind. It started subtle. A glance here, a shift of the body there, like she was rehearsing every move, every expression, every word. And then, in the middle of the backyard, surrounded by our friends, she turned to me, put a hand on her chest and said, "Oliver, I think we need to break up." Time slowed. I could hear the birds above the cherry blossom tree, the distant hum of traffic, even the fizz of the soda cans being opened on the picnic table. People gasped. Some froze mid-step, holding skewers of grilled vegetables, unsure if they should step in or pretend nothing happened. But here's the thing. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I didn't throw myself at her feet. I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I finally understood the strange, twisted clarity of the moment. This was her play. The drama, the shock, the embarrassment. It was all carefully staged, like she wanted everyone to see me crumble, to pity her, to cheer for her courage. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and said, "Well, if we're breaking up, I think this deserves a celebration. Who's with me?" There was a pause, just long enough for the air to crackle. Then laughter, nervous at first, but then real. Friends started clapping, some awkwardly cheering, while a few of the braver ones grabbed the soda and raised their cans in mock salute. Lila's face went pale. Her carefully constructed performance was collapsing, piece by piece, because she hadn't accounted for the possibility that I wouldn't play the part she wrote for me. I continued, "Let's make this memorable. To endings and new beginnings. To honesty, courage, and free barbecue." People laughed louder now, the tension dissolving into something light and absurd. Kids ran past, oblivious to the emotional theatrics. And through it all, Lila's jaw tightened, hands clenching into fists at her sides. The pride she tried to wield as a weapon had lost its sharp edge. I won't lie, I was hurt, but I had realized something important over the past months of quiet neglect. Nothing she could stage would take away my control over my own emotions. She could script the moment, orchestrate the setting, even manipulate the witnesses, but she couldn't dictate how I reacted. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Free from the tension, free from the uncertainty, free from the expectation that my happiness was dependent on someone else's approval. And so, surrounded by friends, with the warm sunlight filtering through the trees and the faint smell of charcoal in the air, I toasted silently to myself, to survival, to dignity, to laughter in the face of unnecessary drama. Even as Lila glared, muttering something under her breath that none of our friends caught, I knew the story of that afternoon would linger, not as a humiliation, but as a lesson. Sometimes, people try to control the narrative, to frame themselves as the heroes and you as the victim. But the power, I realized, is in how you choose to respond. The rest of the afternoon felt almost surreal. People had returned to casual chatter, some whispering about what had just happened, others laughing at the absurdity of toasting a breakup. Lila tried to steer the conversation back to her narrative, pointing at me with a sharp smile, as if to say, See? I'm in control. But her words bounced off a wall I had built over months of frustration and quiet observation. I was no longer playing the part she wanted. I decided to take a walk. Machi and Biscuit trailed behind me, weaving through the legs of our friends as if they, too, understood that the afternoon had changed everything. The air was crisp, the scent of the grill mingling with the faint aroma of spring flowers. I could hear snippets of conversation behind me, friends debating whether this was some twisted prank or simply Lila's dramatic way of showing how unloved she felt. I found a quiet corner of the garden and sat on the bench. For a moment, I let the reality of it sink in. The hurt, the betrayal, the embarrassment. It all mingled together. But underneath it, there was also clarity, a calm sense of self-respect I hadn't felt in a long time. Lila had tried to manipulate the situation, but she couldn't control the way I viewed myself. I wasn't the man she was trying to humiliate. I was the man who had chosen to keep his dignity intact, to turn a potential humiliation into a moment of empowerment. When I returned, Lila was speaking with a friend of ours, Harper, who had that perceptive way of noticing everything. I could see Harper's eyes flick to me, and there was a flash of admiration or maybe relief that someone finally refused to play the victim. I smiled politely, nodding, and turned to address the rest of the group. "Okay, everyone," I said, clapping my hands lightly. "We've had a lot of drama already. Let's finish the day with some good food, good company, and maybe a toast to not letting anyone else write your story for you." Laughter followed, more genuine this time. People started relaxing, returning to casual chatter, while Lila's glare remained fixed on me like a storm cloud that couldn't find the right moment to pour. I noticed a small smirk forming on Ethan, one of our mutual friends, who had been quietly observing the unfolding chaos. He raised a brow and whispered, "You're owning this better than I would have." I nodded subtly, acknowledging the small victory. But it wasn't about winning. It was about control. It was about taking a moment that could have been my lowest and turning it into a lesson in composure and strength. I realized something important. Life is full of unpredictable events, but the power lies not in stopping them, not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, people started saying their goodbyes, hugging, laughing, and reminiscing about minor mishaps from the barbecue. Lila, realizing she had lost the emotional leverage she had tried to wield, retreated to the house. I stayed in the garden a bit longer, watching Machi chase Biscuit around the flower beds, a carefree dance that mirrored the lightness I suddenly felt inside. Later that night, I reflected on the day with a quiet smile. What could have been humiliation had become clarity. What could have been despair had become empowerment. Lila had tried to create a narrative in which I was the defeated husband, the embarrassed man in front of friends and neighbors. But in that moment, I realized the real story wasn't about her or the public breakup she staged. It was about me, about taking ownership of my emotions, my dignity, and my life. I messaged a few of our friends later, joking about how the public breakup barbecue would go down in our history of bizarre gatherings. Most laughed. Some sent emojis. A few admitted they had been bracing for drama, but found themselves cheering for me instead. The validation wasn't in proving Lila wrong. It was in proving to myself that I could remain calm, composed, and even joyful in the face of manipulation. And as I lay in bed that night, Machi curled on my chest and Biscuit at my feet, I felt a strange mix of relief and hope. Relieved that the weight of fear, embarrassment, and uncertainty was gone. Hopeful that the future wasn't dictated by anyone else's theatrics, but by the choices I made, the boundaries I set, and the respect I demanded for myself. Lila's plan had backfired spectacularly, not because she failed, but because I refused to be her actor. And in that refusal, I found freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from public embarrassment, and, most importantly, freedom from the invisible chains that had quietly wrapped around my life over the past year. Sometimes, I think about her intentions, the careful planning, the small smirk she thought would break me. And I smile again, quietly, knowing that the real victory wasn't in revenge or humiliation. It was in living calmly, confidently, and entirely on my own terms. That night, under the soft glow of the porch light, with the world around me quiet and still, I whispered to myself, "You write your own story, Oliver. Nobody else gets the pen."